It's Inappropriate Characters.
Hello, this is the RPG Pundit, the final boss at Internet Shitlords. And I'm here with my partners Venger and Grimjim, where we're going to be talking about all of the controversies you can imagine that have come up in the last week or so in the RPG world. But we're starting with the really big one, which is Gencon. Now, everybody expected that if there was going to be a controversy in Gencon, it would probably have had something to do with either Anita Sarkeesian being the guest speaker there, or with Jim Raggi and the Lamentations crew and the Ennies and things like that. But none of those things were news compared to the really big thing that happened, which was Jeremy Hambley, aka the Quartering, YouTube talk guy, and Magic the Gathering legend, pretty much, got himself violently physically assaulted by a guy named Matt Loter, aka Fantastic Matt, I think, who's a rabid leftist SJW type, also owner of a gaming store and producer of games. He got assaulted in a bar, taken by surprise, sucker punched, attacked. It took 4 people to pull Loder off him. He fled inside the bar, at which point Loder, in a furious rage, punched a window, shattering it. He was saying, "I'm going to fucking kill you." And then he ran off. The next day, or the day after, while Gencon was still going on, not only did Gencon not do anything to, for the safety of Jeremy Hambley and other people, because this guy was basically saying he was going to punch anyone who he thought would have a problem with Anita Sarkeesian. Instead of kicking Loder out, they promoted his products in tweets. They were encouraging him and rewarding him for his bad attitude. So now Hambley's planning to sue Loder. He's pursuing criminal charges. You can find out more about that on his YouTube channel, The Quartering. But we should talk about kind of the angle of what this has to do with Gencon, where very clearly, I mean, from the moment that Anita Sarkeesian was selected as the guest of honor, really last year you already saw it. This year it was just they weren't even trying to hide it anymore. Gencon is very, very clearly decided to orient itself to the social justice regressive left. And what does that mean in terms of the hobby and its biggest convention? Take it away, guys.
I mean, it is an outlier, but it does represent, I think, something beyond the pale, which we should be dealing with. Now, Jeremy, he's a bit of an asshole, it must be said. Not that any of that.
Aren't we all?
Yeah, not that it justifies being punched or anything. I mean, he was banned from playing Magic properly, in the leagues and everything, because he took issue with some cosplayers outside of conventions, outside of playing Magic, and for that he was banned, and he's been kept out of tournaments, things like that he was just going to report on. And that's nothing compared to this. And yet things have been conspicuously quiet about, Matt Fantastic.
He was banned from Wizards of the Coast, from all Wizards of the Coast events, because he criticized a female cosplayer. He didn't run up to her. He didn't put a hand on her. He didn't say anything sexually suggestive to her, as far as I know. He was just criticizing the fact that she was, in his opinion, that she was using her sexuality to make money off of desperate nerds or something like that. And for that, because she felt unsafe because of what he said, he's banned for life from all Wizards of the Coast events. But this Matt Fantastic asshole, who, by the way, already bragged in a video about having assaulted somebody else 10 years earlier at Gen Con, and now assaulted Hambley here, and has promised he's going to keep right on punching any Nazis, by which means anyone at all that disagrees with him. Wizards has said nothing. They've done nothing to stop him. He sells their products at his store. So the double standard is glaringly obvious. If you agree with Wizards with the politics of the Seattle Portland cabal, right? Then you're going to have a blank check to assault anyone you want, and the gaming establishment will protect you, right? But if you're not in the in crowd and you say the slightest thing that somebody decides is a sign of disagreement, then you're a literal Nazi, and not only are you going to be banned for life, you deserve to be violently assaulted.
Yeah, the lack of mentioning it, not only did Gencon not mention it, but as Pundit mentioned, on Twitter, they promoted some of his products, the Assaulter. But when people would ask on, I think, Gencon's Twitch feed or some social media thing where people were constantly like chatting and talking about things, when people would ask like, oh, what happened with the assault, or what happened with Jeremy Hambley, or the quartering, or what's this about a bar fight I heard between two Gencon attendees, Gencon like actively, banned people and threw them out of that chat room, and deleted. I think they deleted conversations and stuff like that, and just tried to hush it up, as if Jeremy was like an unperson, like he didn't exist or he didn't matter enough to make a big deal about someone getting brutally assaulted and battered just a couple blocks away from the convention. I mean, a lot of people made a big deal when I mentioned it because I was upset that this had happened. I had only started watching the quartering, his YouTube channel, about a month ago when he was going on about Jessica Price and how she basically blew her shit up. Get woke, go broke is kind of a famous saying that I don't know if Jeremy created that or not, but he said it pretty frequently back then, like a month ago. So yeah, I've been watching him a little bit. So I was upset, and I would talk about this online on G Plus or wherever, my blog. And a lot of people were like, not only discounting it because he was an asshole or whatever, or because Wizards of the Coast had some problem with him, but he just, I don't know, just they didn't think that Gencon was responsible, I guess, because it didn't happen during convention hours inside their building. But if Matt Loader is a vendor, an exhibitor, and wearing his Gencon badge while he's assaulting Jeremy, and as you said, sucker punching him, he basically was like, hey, are you Jeremy? And Jeremy kind of like from behind, and Jeremy like turned around and like put out his hand because he thought he was a fan of the show. He's like, yeah, hey. And then he just, starts wailing on him, says, I'm going to fucking kill you. And Gencon just like not only doesn't say anything, doesn't make a statement, doesn't warn people, but they actively hush up any kind of investigation or mention of it. It was like, it's unreal. I mean, I think Jeremy feels that it was a surreal experience, but even for us back at home that weren't at Gencon, that just heard about this, and then just heard the deafening silence of the people that could have stepped up, could have said something, could have made an example out of Matt Loader, could have made a statement just in general saying that this kind of violence is not okay. But yeah, it all goes back to the Anita Sarkeesian thing. Why they brought her on not only was a mystery, which we talked about in previous shows, but Matt Loader said in a tweet that anyone that had a problem with her, he was ready to fight them. He was easy to find, and basically threatening anybody that disagreed with her or criticized her for even being a guest of honor at Gencon. So her being there was a direct catalyst for the violence that happened. And in this case, it was a social justice warrior that just popped off because, it could have been, tomorrow it could be some alt-right person. It's just the politically motivated violence that I think all of us can agree is just
except if it was an alt-right person, everybody, and I mean everybody, you and me and Grim and Gencon and everybody would be condemning this piece of shit, right? But because it's somebody on the left, you have everybody in Gencon, you have all of the gaming establishment protecting this guy, which is the difference. This is why you can't say that those are equivalent levels of problems in our society, because the alt-right neo-Nazi assholes are completely marginalized, right? There's nobody that likes them. Nobody on the right likes them. Nobody on the right protects or defends these guys. But the extremists on the left, the guys that are willing to do political violence, the Antifa types, are constantly being protected, defended, and let off the hook, right? And even that shows in Jeremy's attempts to get criminal charges going, where he's had all kinds of obstacles with the police department that have been intentionally trying to make this go away because they don't want to look like they're, defending an alt-right Nazi like Jeremy, and they know that they're going to get into all kinds of trouble with the left if they go after people on the left that engage in political violence, right? This is the same reason that you see all kinds of all of the Antifa guys that are doing destruction of property and assaults on people at free speech events and things like that. The rate of prosecution of this is ridiculously bad. And when they are prosecuted, like the university professor that took a fucking bike lock and tried to bash a guy's brain in, right? Like it was literally assault with a lethal weapon. This guy got off with a fine, right? They let him off with a fine and a warning. He's not going to serve a day of jail time. So this is the problem in our society, is that yes, the right has certain violent extremists, but the right doesn't condone those violent extremists. The left condones its violent extremists. It condones and protects them.
Yeah, I was going to mention the bike lock bandit getting off. That was absurd. But what really strikes me about Jeremy's situation is, he said something mean about a cosplayer, not at an event, not at anything really remotely related to, it wasn't a convention, it wasn't in a Magic chat room, it wasn't anything like that. It's just in his own personal online spaces he was saying this. And they immediately leapt on that and banned him and all the rest of it. And yet someone gets assaulted, okay, not actually at the convention, but during the convention and over views that relate to games and so on. And they do nothing.
Right. And have either of you looked at Gencon's, I forget what it's called, the safety policy or what have you? It is explicitly the rules of Gencon itself that if someone is, engaging in potentially violent behavior outside of the con or has made threats or things like that, that they should be kicked out of the con, right? So to say, oh, well, this happened in a bar, it didn't happen inside the convention hall, that's not an excuse at all. And we all know that if this had been somebody else, like I said, if Anita Sarkeesian had been out there having a drink in a bar and some nerd shouted at her from across the room, that guy would never be going back to Gen Con again, right? They would never let him through the door, even if he was like 100 meters away from her when he shouted. Sorry, 50 feet away from her for the Americans, right? Then he'd still be banned for life, right? But this asshole violently assaults a guy, and he's right there, and Gen Con is promoting his work, which brings us to like the ultimate conclusion here is you mentioned get woke, go broke. I know Jeremy didn't invent that. I'm not sure who did. It might have been Sargon, but I don't know. Anyway, get woke, go broke. So is Gen Con going to get broke over this? Is there going to be enough of a backlash? Because this is the second year, and the first year, which was last year, Gen Con was already going in a more moderate way to talking about this like social justice issue. You saw all their special guests were pretty much either identity politics picks or feminist bloggers who hate gamers, right? And now this year they invited Anita Sarkeesian and excused the violent assault and promoted his products, right? So
yes.
Is there going to be a backlash? Are people not going to come next year?
Yeah, there's going to be a backlash. I mean, even if the deep far left has completely infiltrated mainstream gaming culture, which I don't know if it has or not, but it seems like it's close to that. I think the pendulum always swings the other way eventually. And I think this is the kind of the tipping point. I think things are either going to drastically change or Gencon is not going to be what it was. Other conventions are going to pick up the people that they lost, and it's going to start shrinking, or Gencon's going to get its act together and recognize where they fucked up, admit it, and make amends. Extend an olive branch. Maybe get Jordan Peterson for the next special guest, 2019. I mean, it could happen.
See, I don't know. I don't know if there's going to be a backlash or not, but I am betting you. I would put down money right now that next year Gencon itself is not going to back down. They're going to double down. They're going to go more woke than they were this year. They're going to find a way to top themselves because they think they're more woke. Yeah, but
my prediction.
Right? But not necessarily the first time, right?
You can only prop that, as you say, regressive left and control left, anti-free speech, and thought police and all that stuff. You can only go to that so far, especially with gaming. I mean, gamers, by definition, should be more creative, more intellectual, more sympathetic to things like censorship and other people trying to control what they think and how they behave. You would think gamers would be primed to revolt against this kind of thing. But if they're just going to toe the line and be little pawns in Gencon's identity politics game, then yeah, I see either it's going to just fall or they'll change their tune.
Right, but I don't think that they're going to change their tune next year because I think I'm looking at the social media, and from what I see, the gamers that run Gencon right now and their whole little crowd, they see what happened as a victory. They see it as they won. Ha ha ha! We got away with it. We beat up this guy we don't like, and nobody can touch us. Right. So next year, look for them to go. To try to top themselves, to go more, because they always want to go more. You can never have enough social justice in their views, right?
If there isn't a backlash, of Jeremy Hambley going after his attacker illegally, do you think that's going to have a noticeable effect on that kind of violence, those kind of attacks, the social justice warriors that think that they're tough guys coming in and harassing, threatening, trying to beat up people? Because if he basically ruins Matt's life, which could very well happen, do you think that's going to stop a lot of these assholes and jokers from coming out of the woodwork and just vigilante justice? Or do you think that they're going to be unfazed by that?
It's hard to say, right? Because I think this guy's never going to see a day of jail time, that's for sure, right? But unfortunately, it's really funny because Loader presents himself as being this martial arts instructor. Supposedly he's a certified martial arts teacher. Now, I'm sorry, but if you're a martial arts instructor, if your fists are, if you're the goddamn Iron Fist and your hands are lethal weapons, right? How the hell do you manage to sucker punch a guy from behind in the head and then pound him, jump on him, and do as little damage as he managed to do to Jeremy, where he had like a couple of bruises, and the worst injury he had was this like kind of skin burn on his arm from having his shirt torn by this guy like a little bitch, right? Like it's just pathetic, right? So he's not going to see jail because fortunately in one sense, but unfortunately in the other, Jeremy's injuries are not, I think, impressive enough for the assaults charge to end up landing with jail time, right?
Well,
but
even a week later,
sorry?
Even a week later, you can see in videos that his eye,
he has a bruise. Yeah, he has a bruise.
Burst blood vessels. It's kind of gross. It's red. I dubbed it the woke eye of Sauron. Speaking of that Matt Loader guy, Matt Fantastic, and his Krav Maga or whatever training. If you're right, and he would under the law be treated as a lethal weapon, basically with his hands and feet. It's martial arts.
Except I think he's full of shit because I'm sorry, Krav Maga is what Krav Maga is. It's the martial art of the Israeli Defense Force, right? Like it's a very serious martial art that's focused on doing maximum possible damage, right? And if this guy does Krav Maga, he sucks at it because the amount of damage that he did to Jeremy.
If he's an exemplar of Krav Maga, then Israel is in deep trouble.
Yeah, really.
But, I think there's a chance that he could get prison time, though. I mean, I was watching another YouTuber, a guy that was that knew Jeremy and knew the situation, and he's a lawyer, and he was saying that under Indiana law, that could be like a level 5 or level 6 felony battery. And it's possible he could do like 1 to 3 years in prison.
Maybe. I wouldn't get my hopes up, but then there's the civil suit, right?
Yeah, I'm not gonna hold my breath for that, but it is possible.
The civil suit could go one of two ways, right? Either he ends up, Jeremy wins and he ends up taking this guy for who knows how much, but probably a lot if he wins, or he loses, right? And if he loses the suit, if Jeremy loses the suit, then you're going to see much more of this kind of violence coming from the SJW crowd, right? Because they're going to feel more invulnerable, right? Now, if he wins, that's not necessarily going to stop them. On the contrary, they might double down again, because the thing is, Loader is kind of weird in one sense for an SJW, because he appears to have a real job, like he's got business enterprises, but he has resources and he has an income, all of which are quite strange for most SJWs to either have trust funds or, they live off welfare or they work petty jobs. Like, seriously, they did a study of Antifa last year and found out that almost everybody in Antifa is unemployed. Almost everybody, right? Like almost every single person. So for a lot of these people,
bagels when you're out like trashing people's property at night. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
It's just like,
the threat of a civil suit only matters if you have something to lose, right? Like prison time is one thing, but if the threat is, if I beat up this guy that disagrees with me, then they're going to take away my nothing. I have nothing. I have no savings. I have nothing at all. So of course there's nothing to lose there, right?
Right. I hope the criminal case then they make an example of him and give him prison time, because
these things often take a long time though, don't they?
How can you just sweep that under the rug? If it was a bar dispute between two men that agreed, who were both drinking and agreed, like, let's fight over this girl or something.
Yeah,
maybe that's one thing. But
that's what they're going to try to present it as, a bar fight. But Jeremy didn't throw a single punch, right? It wasn't a bar fight. It was a surprise attack,
Completely surprised. And just pummeled.
and over politics and games, which is just. But I think it'll only have a deterrent effect if Jeremy wins and wins big, and if this guy either gets jail time or a big fine. But it takes so long to go through the system that it might be, another year without knowing how that's going to turn out. And this already had an impact before it happened because people were worried about violence or vandalism or something like that. I mean, James Raji, he had extra security.
Right.
Lots of people have expressed concerns about this. I know privately that the scuttlebutt is that a lot of game designers are really getting more and more worried about this atmosphere now. It's not just us, anti-SJWs, I guess, wherever we happen to be on the political spectrum. Now it's more people. So I had a stream earlier with Mark Ronhagen of Vampire fame. Yeah, he's another dyed-in-the-wool lefty like me, probably more towards the woke side, and he's been horrified, and he's been being accused of being all sorts of things and getting threats and stuff over email.
They called him a literal Nazi, didn't they?
They did, and it's just absolutely absurd. So
that document that linked Vampire the Masquerade with actual Nazism, was that brought up?
Yeah, the 1488 dice rolls, or whatever it was. That's absurd too. But he's upset and angry. I'm upset and angry, and we hope that this will be some kind of turning point against this nonsense. But given everything I've seen over the last 8 years, this has been going on with me in one form or another. Given everything I've seen, I'm not that hopeful. I hope this is a turning point, and I'm going to try and make sure it is. But yeah, it is horrifying. On the one hand, I don't want to give in to these people. On the other hand, I'm incredibly wary about going to conventions now. I already was. This has made me more wary, but that's what they want. I guess the only silver lining is that this has completely overshadowed whatever nonsense Sarkeesian said at the convention.
Yeah, nobody even noticed.
Word of what she said. And if Gencon doesn't hurry up and make some sort of big statement denouncing this, even if I hadn't decided before last week if I was even going to plan on going to Gen Con in 2019. That 19 would have been the soonest I could have gone. But unless things totally change for me, fuck no, I'm not going. One last thing, I think, let me say one last thing, and then maybe if you guys want, we could move on to a different topic. I did reach out to Jeremy Hambley, and he did say that he was interested in coming on the show a little bit down the road when he's kind of finished taking care of business, because he's obviously very busy with the impending, legal matter. So that's cool.
The Quartering and the Pundit together in one place. Heads will explode.
Yeah. The two biggest internet shitlords, combining, and might create a whole new universe. We don't know. Right? You guys, before the show started, you guys said that you didn't see the Joe Mantegna and Stephen Colbert.
Mangiano,
is it? I don't know how you pronounce it.
Spot.
Before we get into that, Benjer, let me just mention one more thing about this subject. Right? Unfortunately, Gen Con is not going to back out. They're going to double down. And the problem is, it's not just Gen Con, right? It's the whole system. The whole system is screwed, right? Because look at, there's an upcoming game convention, PAX, I think it is, where Matt Loader is a guest of honor. He's going to be speaking at that convention. And they've done nothing to remove him. They're going to, as far as we can see, PAX is going to have him on.
There's going to be protests because this story is picking up speed, and it's being carried by more and more reputable, larger news, websites and stations. And I think before PAX happens, I think it's going to get the kind of recognition where people are going to come out in force and protest. If I didn't have, my own career and my family, which I'm like anchored to with my 5 kids, I would consider going and just fucking protesting if they didn't do something about Matt Loader. If he was just allowed to be let in without any kind of, if they just said nothing, they did nothing, that would be unconscionable to me. And I would fucking go there and I would protest the shit out of that place. I would just stand outside with my own picket sign and protest, even if I was the only one.
I hope so.
Because something like that happens with other people. I don't want anyone to do anything fucking crazy or illegal. But, if PAX does nothing, or future conventions, gaming conventions, do nothing, and somehow this Matt Loader, Matt Fantastic, slips through the cracks, I think everybody that cares about these issues need to come out in full force and barrage the convention with emails and tweets and other social media things, and then maybe go there and protest with signs, maybe a big sign that says "Shame on you," whatever gaming convention. This isn't right. Justice for Jerry Hambly. A little hashtag.
You just proved the left can't win.
Something.
Shame on you. You can be a little more creative than that. But anyway, you're right. I mean, the thing we have to do, because my point is, if the whole system is screwed, what you have to do is disrupt the system, right? And none of us are proposing any kind of violence. That's not the way, right? We all agree on that. But the answer is that these guys have got to be shown that they can't have their way in this way, right? And that means using the same Alinsky style tactics that they've used against them, right? To disrupt at every turn until something is done, right? To keep pressuring and shaming and exposing this bullshit, right? Which is, kind of what the Quartering did with Wizards of the Coast when he exposed how many of their Magic the Gathering judges, who work around kids playing Magic the Gathering, are convicted sex offenders. So this is the way to get at them, right? Is to keep exposing their hypocrisy, to keep exposing their totalitarianism, and to keep making it clear that there's this kind of silent majority of gamers that don't want this.
Yeah, this is the violence is too far.
Yeah, absolutely.
Shall we move on? Because this is a bit depressing. Yeah. Avenger, so you saw this Colbert thing. I haven't seen this. Do you want to tell us what it was?
Sure. So Joe, who's married to Sofia Vergara, she's a sexy, voluptuous, this Hispanic actress. Like Modern Family, I think that's what she's in, and she's in movies and things like that. I know her more than I know him. He was in True Blood and the one with the sexy Chippendale dancers, Channing Tatum or whatever. It eludes me, but anyway, they're both pretty big actors, celebrities in America, and. So Joe is coming out with this new line of clothing, which is I think called Death Saves. And for instance, the shirt, it's got Death Saves right here. And then in the back, it's got the 5th edition D&D rules, a variety of rules from Meat Grinder to normal play, Death Saves, and you got to roll D20, a couple, 3 times and get a certain number to whatever. I don't play with those kind of rules, even though I like 5th edition. But so he was promoting his clothing line, and they were both talking about D&D because Stephen Colbert is a big gamer, big Lord of the Rings nerd. Stephen Colbert actually said Cthulhu. He actually voiced, the Dread Lord's name. Which is pretty crazy for me. He was describing a mind flayer because Joe also has this epic level dungeon gaming room in his basement, where I guess he and other celebrities out in California in Beverly Hills play D&D. And he's got like dragon heads and a mind flayer head, and Stephen Colbert is like, oh yeah, it's like a reference to Cthulhu. And they're talking about all kinds of D&D stuff, and even one of the greatest parts was because Colbert hasn't really played since college, so probably maybe second edition, and he was asking Joe what people roll these days for fifth edition to create a character. Do you still roll 3d6 6 times, like in order to get your character stats? And Joe's like, well, no, now really you roll 46, drop the lowest. And Colbert just looked at him. He's like, that's for children. Like, come on. We're talking about like actual D&D, for real men. No, you go 3d6 in order. That's otherwise, otherwise you're just like, what are you in third grade? It was funny. It was a nice exchange. It went on like for 9 minutes, which is awesome because, the whole gaming D&D role-playing, it's becoming more popular, which is awesome because this hobby has been in the dark ages for so long. People just did consider you a nerd, or just didn't consider you at all because you played Dungeons and Dragons. But now it's kind of cool and kind of hip, which comes with its own downside, obviously. And the whole community thing, I know, Pundit, you're kind of have some words about that. But it's just cool that, it's becoming more well-known and kind of hip and cool and not a stigma that you play Dungeons and Dragons. Like now it's, you could maybe say that to a girl and she'd like be interested in playing. Whereas back in the 80s or the 90s, she would just walk right past you to the football player.
You didn't know the right girls, man.
I didn't know any girls. I literally didn't have a girlfriend until I was like 26.
That's quite the admission.
That's so sad. But then, as a true nerd, I just read up on basically being a pickup artist. I studied and I researched and I read books and books and books, and I became a pickup artist. And before I hung up my my dating hat and got married, from 26 to about 36. In those 10 years, I had sex with about 200 women.
So you could admit you didn't have a girlfriend until you're 26 if you follow up with that.
Yes.
That works
out. Really, really sad to really awesome / creepy if you think that's just like a horrible thing, having sex with that many women in a space of 10 years, which some people probably do, but whatever. I enjoyed myself. And
I really can't judge you there, Andrew, because my college years were a drug and sex fueled haze, and I remember at one point one of my friends was also at that time the son of my city, Edmonton's biggest marijuana dealer, he was the cause of me being perpetually high all through university. He described me as a man slut, so. I'm going to be the last person to judge you. Love is the law.
That's right. Love under will, bitch.
There we go.
And as for me, I'm pure as the driven snow, pure and virginal and unsullied and completely vanilla.
Incel, are you?
Like the Queen.
Yes, less said about that, the better.
All right, let's change topics here before this becomes an Alpha Blue live play session. All right.
And then,
Grim, did you have a topic for the evening?
I didn't really. Following up on the Hambly thing, I was kind of the thing with Mark Reinhagen kind of fell together, and so that's all I've been thinking about really. But what you're saying about gaming becoming popular also jibes with some things we were discussing earlier, in that as it becomes more socially acceptable and so on, the culture shifts. I think there used to be this common bond of being bullied and treated badly, and gaming being a safe haven away from that, away from the world, away from the politics and the bullying and the popular obsessions and so on. And that's changing as it becomes more mainstream acceptable. And I think we're losing that, and I think that contributes to the disagreements and the intensity of nastiness within gaming, that we no longer have that common experience, that common bond. I don't know whether you guys would agree with me.
I guess to a certain extent, like from my point of view, I think that if there's a change that happens because of the popularity of the game, and it's an organic change, right? And what you see is just that there's a wider amount of people that are playing. That's probably fine, right? Like, I mean, I've been gaming long enough that when I just started gaming, D&D was still a mainstream popular game. It was sort of like back then you could, buy D&D box sets at Sears or, Woolworths or whatever, right? And I remember distinctly that when I started gaming, right at just at the end of elementary school, beginning of junior high, I was pretty much the nerdiest kid in my gaming group, right? Most of the other people in that group or in that circle were, these kind of heavy metal guys, and there was a couple of girls, and and it was pretty mainstream, right? And then by the time I was in high school, so like 3 or 4 years later, I was by far the least nerdy guy in my group, right? And I hadn't really changed all that much. I think I'd gotten a little cooler maybe, but only a little. But what I saw was that a whole bunch of people that used to be playing stopped playing because it stopped being a mainstream thing and turned into a kind of a exclusively nerd hobby. And it was that way pretty much ever since, until I came to South America, because here that never happened. And here you have this wide variety of people that game. And it was never just an exclusive, like there isn't really there are of course some South American nerds who are like the classic nerd figure that we all know, right? And that game, but those don't dominate the pool of the social network of the hobby, right? There's a lot of completely normal people that game here, right? And I don't think that's something to be afraid of. I've never been a huge fan of the more insular characteristics of nerd culture, this kind of us versus them, or the social awkwardness of it, or any of that. And it's often also led to a lot of problems, right? These kind of the nerd social rules where you excuse a bunch of crappy behavior or bad hygiene or anything, all this sort of stuff, because you were picked on in high school or something like that, right? I don't buy that that's necessary. Now, I can get that some people could feel like the culture itself is changing in such a way that makes them feel less comfortable, but I think that we have to separate that from the more specific element of the SJW crowd trying to specifically change the hobby artificially, not organically, right? This kind of attempt of social engineering of the hobby as part of their larger campaign of their culture war, against Western society or whatever. Those are two different things. I think it's perfectly great that you have more and more regular people playing D&D. I want as many people as possible to play D&D. What I don't want is the culture to change because a tiny group of pseudo-intellectual leftist elitists think they should be in charge.
Right, which goes into the whole gatekeeping thing. I think the more popular the game gets, the more people see restricting how people play or how people think of the game or who plays and who doesn't. It makes them feel like some sort of petty dictator, where finally they're in charge of something or some people, and it just goes straight to their head. And they become the gatekeepers, which is ironic because a lot of people, generally, I think on the far left, they keep mentioning like, oh, but really gaming is so terrible because of the gatekeeping, which they say is it's not inclusive, or women aren't allowed in, or racism, or nobody cares about minorities or something like that. Whereas really gamers, in my experience and everything I've heard of, nobody cares. I mean, if women want to play, if minorities want to play, if gay people, trans people,
that's your crime.
It doesn't matter. Anybody can play, and it's the left that are saying like, oh, well, they jump into the threads that you're having a thread like James Raggy could be talking about like how awesome the gaming is now because anybody has the opportunity to publish anything really they want within reason.
Yeah.
They just have to have a few resources or like half a brain. And then this Kyle Chenier guy or whatever his name is, or others jump into the thread. This happened like a month ago, and it was just like, oh, but gaming is so terrible and toxic because of all these personalities, these gatekeepers, and it's so exclusive, and the old school. They want to play it both ways, like the OSR. They want to be friends and market to the old school Renaissance, but at the same time, they're like, oh, but these are terrible people because they keep all these people out of gaming and they're harassing people and doing all this, which nobody is. Nobody's doing that.
But
Maybe
this is
1% of gamers are actively assholes, to other people at the table. But you find that in any walk of life. So
this is exactly the crime, though, from their point of view, Vengers, that gamers don't care what race or gender or sexuality you are. They just care if you game or not. We think, well, that's good, right? But no, they think that's bad. That's the way that you're being, that you're being wrong, is by not caring about these things. Because to them, your sin is that you're not constantly obsessing over race, gender, and sexuality. Right.
It's identity politics first, and then games second.
Yeah. Right. Games should be a propaganda vehicle for the social indoctrination of the SJW values. That's what they want, right? So the fact that we are actually inclusive and don't give a crap about what any gamer's politics or sexuality or gender or race are is in fact the sin that they are trying to purge us of, right?
Right. So hopefully everybody tuning in knows what the struggle is real, guys. And we deal with this all the time. Pundit probably more than Grim and I, because we're kind of center left people most of the time. So maybe we get just a little bit of this, and Pundit gets a whole lot because he's farther to the right. But yeah, it's like a whole cultural. We're constantly barraged by. Yeah, they want to make gaming into some politics, feel good, social justice. And it's not. It's about games and gaming and hanging out with people and actually role playing. And yeah, they're like taking it and twisting it, and they have the stranglehold. And Gencon's fallen. What's next?
Yeah, and they don't just go and make their own games. They feel like they have to interfere in everyone else's stuff. No, you must write a game in a way that conforms to the way I like it.
Right.
Or you can't sell it, or we'll downvote it into oblivion and review bomb you and get it censored. And rather than adding, it's taken away.
say social justice warrior on N-World
Yeah.
without being banned or at
Yeah.
least threatened or warned.
Told off. Yeah, I was told
Yeah.
off. 'Cause I said
And of
it.
course, the Big
I don't know.
Purple RPG.net is notorious for,
Yes. I don't know why anyone would be on either of those forums when the RPG site exists, right? Like, stop going to RPGNet. Go to the RPGsite.com where you have free speech about RPG topics.
I'm there lurking every once in a while.
Yeah, same,
Waiting
lurking.
for someone to review one of my books.
There is one other thing we could talk about. Just a sort of the last segment. I know you've been feuding with Jonathan Tweet, and I also know that a new edition of Over the Edge is coming out, which I think is a great game. Your argument is over apparently whether it's a story game or not. I would say it's towards a story game, but not quite one.
Well,
very influential game, very interesting, very important, I think, at least from a designer's perspective. It's kind of a surreal mystery investigation thing on a fictional island where weird stuff happens, and you can play just about anything. So I'm glad to see a new edition coming out. I think it's a great game. But what is this? We should have a segment. Who is Pundit feuding with this week?
It seems like there's always one, isn't there?
Yeah. So what's the deal there?
I probably have to go. So
okay.
Oh, well, before you go, Benjer,
and probably comment, maybe do a video of my own based on what you guys are talking about, because I have a
question for you before you go, though.
Yeah.
All right, because this leads into this subject. In 2016, there was this hashtag that was promoted by a whole bunch of lefty game designers, right? That was called Gamers for Her, right? Which was all these gamers declaring and pressuring other game designers, declaring and pressuring other game designers to join the list of declaring their allegiance to Hillary Clinton. And you're famously the one person in our show who supported Hillary Clinton. I wanted to know if you were actually on that list. Did you join Gamers for Her? You did not. Okay. Because Jonathan Tweet was one of the architects of that. And apparently that's the source of part of his feud with me, is that I was one of the people that spoke out the loudest against it. And of course, they were all like telling game designers, look, you better join up to this. You better sign up to this list, or else, once she wins, because we all know she's going to win, then you're going to be right out of the hobby when we take control thanks to glorious Hillary Clinton, right? And I stood up to it.
Didn't she win that election?
She did not. She did not, and they were all surprised. And the thing is, I opposed the hashtag when the election was happening. I spoke out loudly against it because she was someone who advocated the censoring of games when she was a senator. She tried to pass laws to censor video games, right? So I was criticizing it during the election. And of course, after the glorious victory of Trump to make America great again, I mocked the shit out of all these people, right? And that's the beginning of where Jonathan Tweet was pissed off with me, apparently. So anyway, regarding Over the Edge, I love Over the Edge, the original game. It's one of my favorite games. All right, we'll see you later, Venture. Take care.
Take care.
Good show.
It's good that your wife let you stay longer this time. Let's hope that we can continue this. You guys have to support Inappropriate Characters on Patreon if you want Benjer to get to stay longer. See, we had a couple of new patrons, and he got to stay almost an hour now. So that's.
If you want me to stay up past 8:30, you have to send money. Otherwise, it doesn't work.
Yeah, he needs Haagen-Dazs to bait the wife trap.
It innovative as a system. It was just a tremendously good game, right? So my problem isn't with Over the Edge, the original game. My problem is that the new edition of Over the Edge that they're making is completely changing the system to make it into more of a story game, right? Like the mechanics that they're using are basically story game mechanics.
Oh, that's a shame.
The setting is also being changed. They say it's being updated for 2018. Now, Alamarja, the island, the setting was this kind of, island dictatorship, like this weird, like there's a whole bunch of elements there from like Kafka and the beat literature. And one of it is like this, there's this kind of anti-authoritarian, anti-establishment vibe to it, where it like, uses these kind of, it's one of these ridiculous types of imposing bureaucracies and dictatorships, like stuff out of Brazil and stuff like that, right? Like it was enormously clever because it was political without being like topical to the age, right? It wasn't like I don't know, a parody of Newt Gingrich or something like that. Whatever was the politics of the time, right? It was much more universal than that, and that's part of what made it so good, right? And still topical to this day. But apparently, they're kind of updating the setting too, and given Tweet's very clear case of Trump derangement syndrome, you can tell that the updates are all going to be along the lines of the social justice left, and probably you're going to see a bunch of stuff that is just really the type of ridiculous, shallow parodies of what they envision the evil of Trumpism to be today, right? Like that you're seeing all over pop culture, where almost everything in media today is somehow a metaphor for the evils of Trump, right? So instead of this really intelligent, sophisticated setting, we're going to get just this kind of ridiculous propaganda piece that's going to be, irrelevant in, 10 or 15 years when Ivanka Trump is president. Right? So it's just silly. And I criticize that. I criticize the fact that they're putting story game mechanics in it. And I did all this on the RPG site. And apparently, Jonathan Tweet is one of these. There's a lot of people in the game design world that secretly read the RPG site, right? Some of whom I know do this because they've told me, but they never post because they're scared of the consequences of being seen on the RPG site by their fellow, Seattle liberals. And others who I didn't know for sure. But I guess Tweet is one of them because he posted a response on social media to what I said in like page 12 of a thread on Over the Edge on the RPG site. And he basically said that Over the Edge was always a story game because, you don't have attributes and instead you get to pick, whatever attributes you want, right? Which is just proof that he doesn't know what a story game is, right? That has nothing to do with whether a game is a story game or not, right? A story game is if you, as the player, get to use points or mechanisms of some kind to alter the reality of the universe or the plot. And there was nothing of that in the original Over the Edge, right? There's no mechanic by which you get to change the results of the world around you. You are absolutely immersing in a character, living in a virtual world that you have no control over, which is what happens in a role-playing game and not a story game, right? But
it's absent that kind of wresting of narrative control from the GM.
It's a very innovative RPG, but it's completely an RPG, right? And the funniest part, though, is that Jonathan Tweet, for whatever reason, chose to lie and claim that he couldn't talk about this with me directly because after 2016, when he did Gamers for Her, I blocked him on social media, which is a complete lie. He blocked me. He blocked me all over his social media. I've never blocked him anywhere, but he chose to say as if I was the one that blocked him, which is just, I can't understand why he'd do that. I mean, I guess because he wants to look like he's the one that is trying to dialogue and I'm the one that's blocking, right? Which is, it's strange because usually leftists are very proud of blocking people that disagree with them, right? I guess he wanted to seem like he was, the rational one. Maybe he's a big time atheist guy. He wrote a children's story about evolution. So maybe he's still, he's got some of that background of the atheist crowd usually believe in rational debate on subjects. And I think he thought he'd look bad if he revealed that he was the one that blocked me and refuses to debate me, right?
Yeah, he may have just misremembered, of course, but doesn't
Old
seem
age
hugely likely.
yeah. He might.
the Over the Edge system, you can get the system for free, and it's under an open license now. It's called Warp.
That's right.
It's on the Atlas Games site. So if anyone wants to check it out, you can go and do that. I'll probably put it in the show notes afterwards if anyone wants to check it. I'm planning to use it in a couple of future projects. So
I'm very tempted now. I might just have to make an RPG using the original Over the Edge system.
Yeah, it was really good. I mean, I think there's a difference between that and a story game, but I do think the sheer openness and the use of descriptive terms is it's nudging in that direction. It's definitely contributed to that side of gaming, I think.
Did it potentially inspire some people? Well, maybe, but it's not. There's nothing in the mechanics that makes it a story game, and it's like many of these innovative games of the 90s, like Amber, right? Amber was not a story game in any way, shape, or form. It was an incredibly innovative game.
Yeah,
but it was an RPG.
But
so I might have to make. People have to let me know now if they want me to make an Over the Edge rules game, this license. And then I'll dedicate it to Jonathan Tweet I'll dedicate it to Jonathan Tweet and Donald Trump. There we go.
You're such a troll. You really are. Was there anything else we wanted to talk about, do you think, or are we about done for this week?
I guess so. I think we've covered most of the bases, right?
Yeah.
So
we've had our hour, which we aim for the show. Keep it reasonably punchy. So yeah. Do you want to do the shilling for the channel?
So once again, if you want us to be able to someday finish a show with Venger still here, please support us on Patreon. It is the Venger Satanist Staying Up Late Fund. And of course, if we get enough patrons, we'll start doing more shows per month. And if you like this sort of thing, then you've got to support us, right? And if for some reason you can't support us with Patreon dollars, you can support us by sharing this video and sharing our channel with anyone you think would want to watch us. So be sure to promote it. And of course, check out Grim's YouTube channel and my YouTube channel. I don't remember if Venger has a YouTube channel, but if he does.
Yeah.
Check out all three.
They should be linked. They should be linked from the landing page for this channel. So you can go and check them out there and sub to them. We're over 250 subs now, which is pretty good growth for a niche channel. But we'd like to get over 1,000 so that you can monetize at some point. So yeah, spreading the word's the best thing people can do to help us out.
That's right. To help us and to help the cause.
And to get Pundit a better microphone.
Yeah, maybe.
At some point. All right. Thanks for listening, everyone. And we'll see you all next time.
Take care.
And we're out.